morning. This is Kim De Silva from Language of Relationships, and welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, and Fire TV Sticks, Roku, and Roku Sticks, also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Hello again, and it is my pleasure to be introducing you to my friend Tricia Clark this morning. We are talking about something that happens to us multiple times on a daily basis. We have to eat, right? And if you are a parent, I swear, it's like they need to eat like 10 times for the day. I think many of us are coming out of the summer vacation when we had the children home and our fridges were empty, our kitchen cupboards were bare because they were constantly needing something to nibble on. But one of the things that I really liked about Tricia when we first met is that she was very much to the point of why meal times can be so stressful for some of us. And of course, she has the solutions. So I'm going to introduce her and I'm going to ask her some questions about what she does because I want her to explain to you some of the magic that she weaves for herself and for those people who would have the opportunity to work with her. So welcome, Tricia.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, I'm so
Okay.
excited to chat with you. It's been a while.
It has been. So you are the creator of Tricia's Bites of Life. You are also a mealtime mentor, and I have been loving the kitchen witch description as well. But we're going to talk about all of that in a bit. So, all right, maybe you can dive right in and explain all of these things. What is a kitchen mentor? Why Tricia's Bites of Life? And what is a kitchen witch?
Yeah. So, Tricia's Bites of Life is I was looking for some way to channel my love of cooking and creating connections. And just one of the things that kept coming back to me, and when I started my business is really when I started studying human design. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was this whole idea of manifesting generators. I'm not going to dive too deep down the human design rabbit hole, but with manifesting generators that were multi-passionate and were meant to like lean into all the things and not do one thing at a time. And somewhere along the way, like Tricia's Bites of Life just seemed to really resonate with me because it obviously implies the food, but it also implies all those little bits, all those small moments that
Yeah.
make up some of the most special moments that we have in our lives. And to me, that's really what mealtime is. And I was like, Tricia's Bites of Life encompasses all of that, from sharing anything that's personal to the business. And so that's kind of where it started. And I really toyed and troubled with the whole what is my title? I started out as cooking coach. I'm like, that doesn't feel right. It's about
Right.
more than the food. It's about connections. It's so much more than that. So like, now what is it? And so we've been through several iterations over the last 3 years to figure out like what really feels right. And Mealtime Mentor feels right because what I do is really help women and guide them in the process of finding out what works for you to make it less stressful or not stressful at all, because there is no one size fits all solution. It may be meal planning. It may just be deciding on what's for dinner. It may be that the conversations feel stale around the table, right? So I really liked the word mentor more than coach because I'm not doing it for you. I'm guiding you and helping you find what works for you. And then along the way, I really discovered, I have a spiritual side, in terms of like oracle cards and tarot. And I had never really shared that side with everyone. And I was like, this is a piece that I need to share because as I learned more, a kitchen witch is really somebody who's all about the hearth and home and communicating that love through food and connection. It's not all about spells and, all of that. While that's fun and interesting, it's really about the intention and the energy that we put into it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's what I've been trying to communicate. And so here we are as Mealtime Mentor and Kitchen Witch.
Oh, very love it, love it, love it. All right. Now, that word connection, and that is something that really jumped out at me, I guess, because of what I do. And you talked a lot about before, using meal times as connection points. What did that mean to you? Like, why do you look at it that way?
Yeah, I look at it that way. I'm gonna rewind a little bit, and we're gonna go in the Wayback Machine. As a child, I don't remember a lot of family dinners, and some of my fondest memories are honestly, this was occurring to me this weekend, actually. We were out on a pontoon boat with some friends, and I was like, wow, some of my fondest memories are with my family on the pontoon boat where we would just pull off the side of the lake and we would grill brunch. And I remember loving those moments. But in terms of like daily home life, I was the youngest of several. And I think they just thought I'd figure it out, like kind of done at this point between like my stepdad's 6 kids and my mom's 4. Like I was loved and provided for, don't get me wrong. But like creating those moments when I was the only kid left at home just was no longer a priority. So when I got married and had kids, I knew I wanted it to be different.
Yeah.
And I went too far the other direction and I was forcing it. And then I was so frustrated at the end of the workday. Like, I don't know why nobody wants to eat what I cook. I try so hard. No one appreciates me. Like, let's just get it over with. And I hated the whole aspect of it. And I was like, I literally, they're at school, I'm at work. Like, I literally have this pocket of time and I don't want it to be miserable. I have
Exactly.
to feed them.
Yeah.
I love to cook. And so it kind of occurred to me at some point that I was a big chunk of the problem. And the energy that I was bringing to the table was of stress and angst and frustration. And we all know that laughter is contagious. We know that energy is contagious. And so I was spreading the exact thing I didn't want. And
Wow.
so over the years, it really became that mealtime became that point where we did connect, whether it was sitting on the couch or around the dinner table, at
Mhm.
least a couple times a week, really became the hub of where we had all of our conversations. Um, and did it happen overnight? No, but there were little things along the way, like changing the conversation to, you know, just really it started with me shifting how I showed up in the kitchen and what I wanted mealtime to be. And it really, it sounds so simple. And yet I know that it's not, but it is a simple shift to some extent.
No, it is. And I mean, I guess similar to you, I remember because both of my parents were working outside, and we would have long days out at school. By the time we got home, dinner really wasn't that much of a sit down together and have it.
Yeah.
So maybe like once for the weekend, we might actually sit together and have a meal together. Usually Sunday breakfast, and similar to you when I had my own family, I'm like, well, I want us to have more mealtime
Mhm.
together. And it works most of the time. I think one of the things I loved about COVID actually was that we ended up having, 2 or 3 meals
Yeah.
together a day. And it wasn't bad. It was, I thought I would have gotten fed up of it, but it was, we had to eat. The days at that point were pretty much were punctuated by our meal times.
Yeah, then you go from not any together time to like so much together time, not to mention wanting to eat all the time. And that brings its own level of
Exactly,
angst. Yeah.
exactly. Oh my gosh, I had them on a schedule, and I had the snack times and meal times highlighted. I mean, do not ask me for food outside of these periods. So,
And if you want something, here's the drawer you can choose from. That's one of my favorites. Like, these are
yes,
the things.
exactly. This is your safe space. But one of the things that I find, and you mentioned it just now when you talked about the frustration of by the time you get home, you're tired and you're
Mhm.
trying to force this actually before we even go there, this is why these conversations can just go anywhere and everywhere, right? um, as we're talking about the connections issue,
Yeah.
um the phones at the table. Now, Trisha, you and I both, we run our businesses from our computers, from our phones. So it's
Mhm.
like, well, yeah, always nearby. And, we kind of take it for granted. Like the phone is literally next to me so often.
Mhm.
I remember like when my husband used to do it, he'd be like, can you pack your phone away? But now we're getting into this stage now where, our 2 eldest have phones now. So we have to be so conscious now when we're having those meal times. It's like, well, all right, phones go over on the counter or in another room because we don't want that distraction from
Mhm.
the opportunities for connection at mealtime.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's something that comes up. I
No,
know.
it is something that comes up a lot. And, I strongly encourage a no phone rule if you feel like your family needs it. We've never had one,
Mhm.
but what I do is I turn on music and it sets the stage, right? Like as soon as I turn on the music and the plates go on the table, everybody knows. And it's not that the phones aren't there,
Yeah.
but we are also a family that as we're talking, we're like, "Oh, yeah, what was that? Let me look that up." And so it becomes like we're Googling, right? Because, we're challenging each other on whatever somebody said, or but I also keep a box of questions at the table. And so I, by doing those things, I never felt like I had to instill the no phone rule, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a place for it. And I know that, and to be honest, like a lot of it came later for that really strong connection around the table. Like I said, it happened over years as I figured out like, oh, here's what I'm doing wrong, or here's what we can do differently, and figuring out what works. The
Mm.
benefit of that is I've done a lot of it and now I can help you get there faster than what I did. But all that said, like my children were teenagers, we're talking that mid-teen. And I don't know. I don't know why it never really was an issue because they were always attached to their phones.
Mhm.
But I also realized early on that we didn't need to do it every night. And maybe that's part
Yeah.
of what made it easier too.
Yeah.
I tried to meet them where they were and do what worked for everyone because my husband would rather eat worms than sit down at the table every night of the week as well. Like it just wasn't our thing. So we had to find ways, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
and just one example of that before I talk around the table, but I use that kind of like as a metaphor because as teenagers, we often, not as my kids as teenagers, we often sat in the living room on the couch.
Yeah.
But if I could get my teenager to share a show with me that he's interested in,
Yeah.
I'm learning something about what connects him and what he's interested in. And if that gets him to sit down for 20 minutes with me to share something about his life, then
Yeah.
I will sit in front of the TV. That's one of the things that I know that it's probably an
Mhm.
unpopular opinion is, it can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be around the table. It's about again, it's the intention.
Exactly. Very important, the intention. And I think that is one of the things about technology is that it's not always a bad thing, and the same thing, the issue with the phones and the distractions at mealtimes is more that people try to do their own thing separate from
Yes.
the rest of the family. But if you're doing, if the phone is part of your conversation, if it's part of your interaction, then it's not that it's causing a problem, it's actually helping.
Yeah, and in truth, it's all how you set it up and how you wanna try it, and if you try it that way and it doesn't work, then instill a no phone rule and start it 1 night a week, you know? Then
Exactly.
it's not a, like, no phones at the table, which comes
Yeah.
across as a very different energy,
Yes.
right?
Exactly, exactly, exactly. I mean, I do have to say no phones at breakfast because I'm like, I need to get you out of the house. And if
Yeah,
you're just watching your
fair,
oh.
fair. Man, I honestly think that getting ready for school and getting the kids out of the house in the morning was, like, the far worse battle than dinner time. Like, so many shouting matches in the morning.
Oh my gosh, yes. We just got just back into it now. They've not been too bad. They're still relatively excited about school. So they're waking up in the morning. Like, it's going to be, yeah. Let's see how the weeks progress.
Yeah.
So,
Well, new routines or even any routine at that point it's always fun.
exactly, exactly. Now, I'm going to come back
Yeah,
to, some of the issues around, the differences between meal prep and actual meal times.
sure.
But I also wanted to touch on, I mean, you've mentioned your children. Now, one of the things I know you might not mind sharing is that your kids are grown now.
Yeah.
So it's, yes, you aren't dealing with the daily struggle of people coming home from school and be like, Mom, where's dinner? But you did. And
I did.
yes, and I just wonder, what is what does mealtime mean for you now with the kids not home compared
Yeah,
to?
I mean, gosh. It's every season of life is different and every season of life brings new challenges, and to say that we don't have any challenges now with mealtime would be a lie, because we went from cooking for 4 to it just being my husband and I, and he's retired and I work from home. So like we're together a lot, y'all, a lot,
Yes.
a lot. And so there was the transition of going from cooking for 4 to cooking for 2, and then having all these leftovers and wondering like, God, I feel like I'm wasting so much food, to, really being able to lean more into my business. And there are days that I just don't have it in me and I don't want to. And
Yeah,
so I discovered very quickly that I need to change the way I meal plan to accommodate for that. And so it does change. Now, the upside is when my kids come home, I now get to say, what do you want me to cook for you? And that is usually not a question I would ever ask, because you get so many opinions and then you're right back in the decision overwhelm. And so now
exactly.
I'm like, okay, you're coming home for dinner. What do you want? Right? Because I get to pour into them when they come home. They're both college kids. And so like to come home to a home cooked meal, they're
Yes,
like, yes, they're ready.
exactly. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. Hi, Samantha. Um, okay. Meal prep. Now, I'm telling you why I want to touch on meal prep, because when I first met you, I knew you had run a challenge. So this is a couple of
Mhm.
years ago, and I think it was the clear out your pantry or clear out your
Yes.
fridge one.
Hmm.
So if I want to start on this journey of having more stress-free meal times where we can actually have meaningful connections, meaningful conversations, enjoy each other's company, why would you have had me start with this clean out?
Because I feel like anytime you declutter something, you create more space for the things that you want, right? When you feel organized, you feel lighter and you're more excited about moving forward. And so I love to start there, because when I open my fridge or my pantry, like it's kind of that closet that, you're kind of afraid to open, right? And so it's a great place to start with mini action steps so that you get those little wins all along the way. Like pick the fridge today, pick the pantry if it's my pantry, pick it over the weekend because it's going to take more than a few minutes. But start small, right? And so you're decluttering, you're looking for the things that you have. For me, when I clean out the fridge, I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that I bought that sauce I was so excited about. Now I'm excited to use it again if it's not expired. And then the idea of throwing things away is, there's something really empowering about throwing stuff away. And I don't know. Anyway, so that's why I start there, because it declutters everything down to what you feel like is the most important. And then you can start with that. You don't have to go out and like buy a whole meal plan's worth of groceries and
Right.
then come home and meal prep it all. Like, I feel like that's where a lot of us start. And we're automatically setting ourselves up in a space of overwhelm because we've decided we're going to go from here to here rather
Yeah.
than from here to here. And so
Yes.
I love to start with that declutter your pantry challenge. And then I love to move to, here's how I recommend you create a meal plan. And what is that? And really walking you through the steps of what does that look like for you? It's not
Right.
my meal plan or my meal planning process. It's what does it look like for you? And we start with those steps so that you start to feel like, oh, this isn't so hard. This
Right.
doesn't have to be this big mental clog in
Exactly.
the.
And for somebody who's never done it before, I mean, okay, so I know I've told Trisha before that my husband is the one who does most of the cooking in our household, and and one of the things he's been very resistant to, but he's coming around now, is creating a meal plan. He's like, oh, there's so much structure. I'm like, yes, but we don't
No,
have.
no.
It's like, yeah, exactly. He's gotten to the point now where it's like, oh crap, it's Tuesday and the kids have to eat on Wednesday, and I'm not quite sure. I'm like, if you have
Yes.
a plan.
Yeah, and you'll learn very quickly with me that so here I am talking about meal planning and routines and processes. And the truth is, I hate structure. I rebel against structure. I like very loose guardrails. That's what works for me.
Hmm.
Other people need that rigid structure. I'm
Yeah.
just not one of them. And so, but I get that a lot where all of a sudden when you hear meal planning, you're like, oh, you're putting me in a box. Like there's no room for creativity in there. And
Mm.
that's so not true. It's really about like, I mean, meal planning gets this bad rap of being 3 square meals and 2 snacks 7 days a week. And literally a meal plan for me looks like, these are the 3 recipes I'm going to cook for dinner this week. And I'll decide each day which one of them I'm going to cook. And I know
Right.
that one night a week, my husband's going to cook. That's my plan.
Right. And you just make sure you have this stuff in the house
Yeah.
if you decide to do it.
And every day I walk to the fridge because I keep it posted, so there's never any question about what's for dinner this week.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's another question in the world that causes the hair on the back of the neck to stand up like what's for dinner. Like I just don't. Visceral reactions for us for that question, right? And so I keep a list. And then, at now without the kids home, I'll be like, okay, Ken, here are the 3 or 4 things that are on the menu. And I've already decided which 2 don't sound good to me. So I've already put me first. Then I'm like, of these 2, which one do you want?
I love it. I love it. But exactly. And it doesn't have to be so it doesn't have to be something that's onerous, but it's just meant to give you assistance,
Yeah.
especially when, you've got so much going on. And then it helps even with, if you're making diet changes or lifestyle changes, you
Mhm.
want to have the good stuff or the approved stuff
Yes.
readily available. I think that's what's gotten him kind of like more interested in it, because it's like now we're like watching what we eat more carefully. So it's like,
Mhm.
oh, well, then need to have
Well, and if you have dietary restrictions and other health issues, like it does create additional angst and noise. And I do not mean to diminish that at all. Like
yeah.
those are challenges to be worked through. And so I've actually been creating a really fun AI chatbot called the Kitchen Witch.
Ooh,
And she's really there for you to type in and say, I have these 3 things in my kitchen. What can I cook with it? For when
yeah.
you don't have that plan and you just need somebody to make the decision for you, it will
Mhm.
give you a recipe and be like, here you go. And you can say, I have these dietary restrictions and I need a meal plan or I need a recipe that accommodates this. And rather than finding and weeding through 500 results on Google or Pinterest, you can ask it for 1, 2, 3, 5. I mean, whatever. And I found that just eliminating that one point of decision fatigue has been huge. It's been
Exactly.
huge.
Ooh, I like that. And okay, so what would you say? I mean, because of what you do,
Mhm.
mentoring other people, helping them with their meals, their
Yeah.
lifestyle. w- What are some of the biggest challenges that you see? I know we talk about the dietary
Mhm.
challenges, but
I see dietary restrictions as probably the most common one.
right.
And along with that, I'm gonna well, these and a couple of these work together, but I would say decision fatigue is a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of that is either I don't want to use the word failure, the lack of having a plan, right? Forgetting
Right.
to plan.
Yeah.
Picky eaters is another one. And I'm gonna lump that with people pleasing, right? Like I'm asking everyone else what they want to eat this week, or
Yeah.
you know, picky eaters and people pleasing. I
Yeah.
would say those are really the huge buckets.
Yeah.
People say time, but at the end of it, it's really not time. It's not the time to cook it. It almost all of it comes down to the decision process of what to cook. And I honestly think that's one of the things that surprised me the most as
Right.
I've built this business is that that's really the crux of it. But that decision involves so much because you're feeding and wanting to pour into other people. And if you feel like you're not feeding them what they want, then we don't always feel fulfilled on our end.
Exactly. And then that becomes the challenge, because it's like you want to give them what they want, but sometimes it's not necessarily what they need. And then that's
Right. I'm a big fan of you cannot please them all the time at the same time, but
no,
you can create a system where you please each one at different times, including yourself. And then
exactly.
everybody at that point feels seen, heard, loved, and accepted. It just
Mm,
doesn't all have to be at once.
no, it doesn't.
And we put so much pressure on ourselves that it all has to be that.
Precisely. All right. I'm going to switch gears a little
Yeah.
bit, because I remember last year I was part of one of your brunches.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, not in real life. It was just it was just virtual. Are you doing any of your virtual brunches anymore still?
Yeah, so I've changed up the membership a little bit to where we're gonna do them quarterly. It just felt like monthly was too much for everybody to keep up with and attend, and they're so much fun, and so, we've changed it up a little bit where I do Ask Me Anythings in the group each week and share recipes and whatnot, and we do challenges each week when every month has a theme and each week builds on itself, and then we're doing quarterly virtual dinner parties or brunches.
Yes.
Yeah, which those are really fun. There, you get a menu and a grocery list, and you show up, and you can either hang out or you can cook with me
Mm.
in Zoom. And I found them to be a lot of fun. And I love to teach cooking, but not, but in a way with lots of tips and tricks. And I find that it's best when I'm doing it myself
Yeah.
and just sharing versus like a scripted thing. That's obviously, you can tell I'm not very scripted. So.
That's perfect. Because no, that session, the one that I attended, it ran so well. It was, I really felt like I was in your kitchen, except that I couldn't actually eat your food. Big problem. So,
We
but
need television.
exactly, exactly. But yeah, it was that sense of this is what is happening. Without it being so super formal, and we were able to like ask questions and just find out what was going on, and see things happening, and look at the different ways we could make use of it. I mean, everyone's tastes are different, their families are different, so yeah,
Yes.
it
And
really
it was
was.
that the one where we did a sheet pan meal?
I think so.
I think so. Yeah. I love sheet pan meals, and we forget we can do them for breakfast.
Yes, yes, yes. Last Christmas we did a sheet pancake, which went
Ooh.
really well. I was surprised, and all of them, because we had all of my husband's family over, and all of the kids went crazy over it, and we were able to like send them home with stuff that they could just, you know, after we cut it up, it was like
Yeah.
little neat
Oh,
squares. Yeah,
yeah.
next morning it went into the toaster, and that was it.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it was perfect. But yes, I have to remember that, sheet pans are an option. And, for everybody, and this is one of the reasons why you probably want to get in touch with Tricia and find out more about her different offers, because, you know, we talk about meals and we talk about the stress of meals. They don't have to be stressful.
No.
Mm. And yes, it may take you some time in the beginning to get your ideas out, figure out what works, what doesn't work. Try a couple new things here and there, but it is time well spent, and they are opportunities. And I'm coming back to this word connections. They are opportunities for connection. Did you like this? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Was it the texture? Was it the taste? And these are conversations you can
Mhm.
get your kids into, because very often when we have those picky eaters, one of the things is that it might be specific things, it might be a specific ingredient, it might be a specific texture of food that they don't like. For example, one of my kids, he is the one out of all who's most interested in cooking, but he likes to know what everything tastes and feels like.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I give him, he won't eat things like cheese paste and chicken paste or anything where everything is all mushed together. It's like, what's that?
Yeah. It should have texture, is what he's saying.
Exactly. And I should be able to see what is in my food.
Yeah.
So, which does not help when you want to just, make some tuna paste sandwiches for everyone. That's a different story.
Yeah. So true.
So it's, all of it. But it has been interesting kind of like getting to have those conversations with him about his preferences and why, because
Mhm.
he's my least talkative child. But if we're talking about the food and what
Yes.
he cares about, he talks. So it's really great. And now I want to come back to that whole idea of connections
Mhm.
with your spouse. So, one of the things I think I posted recently on Instagram was about, if you're distracted at meal times and you're missing an opportunity for connection, do something fun, like turn something into a game, do some sort of mini challenge. It's not about staring into each other's eyes and holding hands with one hand while you try to eat. No.
That's for dating and anniversary dinner date nights or something like that. It's not.
No.
We've been married 27 years. Like, we don't do that at the dinner table at home unless it's like a really special occasion and we're like, wow, we got to bring the romance back. And then it's very intentional. But like, we're not holding hands over the dinner table. Okay.
No.
Let's be real. We're just not.
So this is where I think, the comment that you made about how your family, makes the phones part of the meal. I mean, and this is the thing.
Yeah.
I think, when my kids are away, when my kids go to my parents every so often, usually every vacation, they actually spent 2 different weeks with my parents this year, which was great. But yeah, we enjoyed our meal times, and I really don't think there were anywhere it was like, super romantic and candlelit dinner or anything, but we enjoyed our meal times, and there was the conversations, the laughter. Yes, the
Mhm.
phone was there. I remember like one meal we were meal prepping for other meals.
Mhm.
Like, you kind of need it because all the recipes are here.
Right. Right.
um, do you have any tips then? So like, if it's just because I know, as you said, for you right now, many meals are just you and your husband. Like,
Yeah, they're just the two of us. Do find that we're a little more intentional now because we spend so much time, either in front of the TV or kind of each doing our own thing, that I have noticed that we're trying to sit at the table a little bit more, which has been interesting because he's normally the one who that's not really his thing. But I do really like it, and I don't make it part of the plan. It can't be forced, but there are, getting him involved in the kitchen when I'm cooking, like asking him to like pick out the wine and open it. And then he's pouring, there's something about, he goes to get that bottle of wine. It's like, he brings me my first morning cup of coffee. And so when he goes and opens the wine and pours the wine and brings me that glass while I'm cooking, like, he's communicating with me. It's those little things, right? And if I always put music on if we're sitting at the table. Like, I love a good Spotify playlist to hit like all the moods or the theme of the dinner. Like that, I get nerded out over that. And I have a playlist for every mood that I cook in. So to
oh,
get me
wow.
in the space that I want to be in. So it could be cooking with the crooners. It could be cheer up the cook. Like, I have a bunch of them. And it just is, it's how I shift from the daytime to the evening. For me, it's always music and a little pour of wine. Anyway, it doesn't answer the question, but
Yeah, but do you ever share your playlists by any chance?
I do.
Oh, good to
I
know.
do. Yeah. So if you're looking for a playlist, just let me know what it is that you're wanting to feel at dinner time, and I'll hook you up with one because I love putting together playlists. So that's part of it. But one of my husband's favorite party games is I have a useless knack for remembering. I can usually name a song after just a couple of bars, words, or
Mhm.
sounds. And I have this useless memory of like 80s bands and band members. And so
Oh,
one of his favorite party games is to start he's the ultimate channel surfer on the TV anyway, but he starts channel surfing on Spotify, and he literally puts me in that space of name that tune.
that's fun though.
Yeah.
That works for your personalities. It's
Yeah, and
perfect.
it's not like it's ever planned. It's just like he'll be like, "Ooh, what's in?" Because something will come on, and I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, that's so and so," and then all that. Sometimes that triggers him into it. But I go back to those conversation cards too. Like, I have a box of them for couples, and every now and then, like whether it's at the dinner table or we're just hanging out, I will just pull them out and start asking a few questions just to spark the conversation, because honestly it can get stale. Like, we've been married 27 years and raised 2 kids, and we were together a lot because we're both at home. Like, we it seems weird to say we'd run out of things to talk about, but we talk about the same things over and over. And so the question cards are really fun for getting us to think back, like, what's one of your favorite memories of
Yeah,
us, or what's a dream vacation you haven't taken yet? Like, just things to get us thinking and differently than the normal talking about the day.
exactly. And I think one of the things I like about that idea too is that meal times lend themselves to having those types of
Yeah.
conversations without it feeling weird. Because I mean, I've heard that feedback before from people
Yeah.
like, oh, those conversation starters or those cards, they're so forced, but they don't have to be.
No, and I'll grab a few and put them in my purse for when, like, we do go out for dinner.
Yeah.
I pack them with girls' weekends, like, not the couples ones, but
Yeah.
I'll pack. I mean, I carry them with me all the time because they do, like, you can just get caught in
in the day to day. And it's that,
Yeah.
yeah. And, and I can tell you, even, okay, we've been married 15 years, together 24. And sometimes one of the things that we always talk about is trying to keep things different so
Mhm.
that we have that sense of novelty and that sense of curiosity. Because there have been times we go out and we're like, oh, thank goodness we're away from the kids. And then it's like, okay, we're not talking about the children. We're not talking about home. We're not talking about routines.
So what do
Oh,
we talk about?
that's left. Exactly.
Right? Right?
So, this is coming from someone who, has created those conversation starters for
Yeah.
other people to use. So it happens. It just is a natural part. So, it's normal. Now the key there is to recognize it's happening and not get stuck in it, and
Yes.
this is where your
And
conversation.
find those little things. So we just remodeled our downstairs into this lovely bar area because I love to play mad scientist in the bar. I love home mixology. And we've got a turntable down there. So now sometimes, maybe 1 or 2 nights a week, like after dinner, we've watched TV. We'll just go and sit down there, make a cocktail, and put on a record, right? And we've changed the environment. We
Right.
may sit down there and not say anything, but we're still there together, or we're probably talking about the music or arguing over which album to play, or I don't like that one, put on another one. It's still conversation and it's hilarious in hindsight, right?
And yeah, I mean, come on, we all had those silly arguments, but they
Yeah.
are kind of part of what makes us
Yeah,
who
and another fun I'm gonna share a couple of other fun ideas, and one of these is one that Ken did for me, but also my daughter's boyfriend did for her last week, and we had birthdays last week, and so her boyfriend took her to the store under the premise of buying groceries, and then said, "You have" walked her over to, like, the toy aisle, and we're obsessed with Legos, by the way, so,
Ah,
he takes her to the toy aisle and says, "You have 1 minute and a budget of $100, go." Like, how fun is that? She's
exactly.
25, but it puts you back in that kid space of shopping the toy aisle and having to make a decision,
Mm,
especially knowing somebody who's, like, gonna sit there in angst over it, right? Like, but he made it fun.
yeah.
And then for my birthday, my husband was like, "I'm not telling you where we're going," and he took me to the Lego store and Barnes& and Noble, and as a 55-year-old woman, I got to buy Legos and stickers for my birthday, like, right?
It worked, right?
It
It worked.
works. It's paying attention to those little things. Not everything has to be a big to-do. It's the
No,
little things.
exactly. The little things that count, the little things that make a difference in our relationship, and those small things are those can be the talking points. I mean,
Yes.
and this is it, and this is another reason why I say sometimes it's important to, you know, go out, to go for drives, go for walks, because your surroundings often
Mhm.
give that little push, that little jog, as in, this is something we can talk about. This is a question I can ask. Okay? And you're not grasping at straws. You're just finding out things about your partner that you may not even have known before. And so now, I know you mentioned it at the start,
Mhm.
and and we said we'll come back to it too. So you have been implementing human design a bit. Now,
Yes.
how do you find that helps, or how do you find, like, how do you mix it in with what you do?
Yeah, so my personal journey was as I was getting more into human design and I was building this business, and it was kind of at the same time. They were never really meant to link.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, "Oh, this makes sense." And then, I read my husband's chart, and I was like, "Oh, that's why we're having these conversations over and over again." So let me give you an example, and if you're not familiar with human design, like, I'm happy to do, like, a mini reading to give you kind of the highlights because I really focus mostly on strategy and authority, and if we dive any deeper than that in, like, a one-on-one session or a VIP day, we get really, really detailed, which is super fun, where we can talk about your strongest senses, your strongest like, the environment that you best digest in, and so I've really been bringing that in because what I'm finding is not only did it make a difference for me, but when I did the charts of my whole family, I was like mind blown of these are why I had these problems. So, and I'll come back to it, but you mentioned your son and the texture issues,
Yeah.
right? Like if we know how they're designed, we no longer have to feel like it's an attack on us that they don't know what they want. We can actually understand why it is they operate the way they do and what can we do differently to prepare them differently or to serve them differently, either one. So my husband and I are both manifesting generators, and so we don't love a ton of structure. We change our minds all the time. Like I may make plans with you for tonight, and this morning I might be like, I don't feel like it. Like it's just the way we're wired. We're wired to do what we want in the moment. But humans need some structure, right? Well, he is what they call an emotional manifesting generator. So he has to work through his emotions and feel it out to make a decision. I have a sacral authority. My gut knows instantly when you ask me if I want Italian, I know instantly if I do or if I don't. So I make decisions very, very quickly. So not only did this help us understand our decision-making processes and so many of the arguments that we've had about whether it's how we spend money or what we want to do, he's like, don't poo-poo me on my idea already. I'm like, but I can. I already know I don't want to do that. Well, you haven't even heard me out. I'm like, I don't care. I know it's not right for me. And he's like, right? He hasn't even worked through it yet. So think about that at mealtime when you ask somebody, what do you want for dinner? Like, don't ever ask me, what do you want for dinner? I will not be able to tell you. But if you tell me, do you want Italian? I can answer you right away.
Right.
So I'd be asking, what do you want for dinner? And he's not even ready to think about dinner. He just finished breakfast.
Yeah.
And so I have to give him options to think through.
Yeah.
Whereas I know in the moment exactly what I want. So if you think about that, even in terms of your kids, if you've got somebody who wants the structure and you don't have a plan because you don't need it, but they do, they're not prepared, right? So we can bring all these things together to say, okay, in our case, here's the plan. You know what's coming. You just may not know which night. Or maybe themed dinners are a great option. Like, okay, the kids always know to expect Taco Tuesday, and that makes one of them and the way that they operate really happy. They know what to expect. There's no surprises.
Right.
But you could change what the taco is. You get the variety of saying we're going to have chicken tacos, fish tacos, or regular tacos, right? And so that's where I bring it in is understanding each person in the household and how they operate, but also understanding how you operate because it's going to make a big difference in how you meal plan. If you're a peer generator, you're going to want structure. But if you are a manifesting generator, you're probably not going to want a rigid structure.
Ooh. So yeah, that does help because as you said, some of us thrive in structure and others resist it at all possible costs.
Right. And your human design chart, like I said, will even tell you like what your strongest senses are. Are you meant to be do you digest better in sunlight? Does your body prefer hot or cold foods? There's so much detail.
Right.
That becomes mind-blowing when you're like, oh, that makes sense now.
That's why this works for me and that's why that doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're meant to eat in caves and your husband's meant to eat in sunlight, and by caves, we just mean like a dark, moody restaurant, right? But if he's meant to eat in sunlight, then he's going to want someplace bright and cheery. And all of a sudden, you're going to be like, oh, that's why we couldn't agree on this one restaurant that I love so much.
Exactly. Now that's
we go here this time and we go there next time.
Exactly. And you both get it and you both prepare. You're both prepared. You know, this is not my favorite, but I really love spending time with this person.
Yeah. And I know that sounds complicated, but the truth is, if you're operating from how you're designed, it actually should come very naturally to you. And then again, you've knocked down another barrier that's made mealtime stressful because you're operating in your own natural energy. And if you're doing that and you know what their energy is and you can connect with it, everything becomes easier.
Exactly. And that's the whole that's a lot of what we're talking about here. How do we create those spaces for connection? And mealtimes are a good place to do that.
Yeah.
How it looks like. All right. So a couple more questions for you before we start to wrap up. Your podcast. What is your podcast about?
My podcast is Mealtime Magic and Mayhem. And you can find it on Spotify or you can find it also on my YouTube channel. It's all about making mealtime easier. It could be interviews with previous clients and what working with me has done. It could be ideas on how to tap into your summer farmers market. So,
Oh.
yeah, there's always whether it's a plethora of recipes or meal planning. I haven't done one on human design yet, come to think of it, but there. So yeah, I mean, it's all about the mealtime magic and mayhem, from sharing fun stories to failures to recipes. Come check it out.
Sure. And speaking of those recipes, so these are all your recipes, or do you tweak other recipes?
It's really a combination of it all. I mean, I have my favorite bloggers that I follow, and I also have several of my own recipes. It's just, I get inspiration from everywhere. I'll quite often travel. And so if I have something that I love when we're traveling, I'll come back and try to find a recipe that looks like it fits the bill, and then maybe tweak it and end up creating my own.
Fair enough. Exactly. Exactly. So when is your recipe book coming out?
Thanksgiving.
Oh, yay!
Yes, I'm part of a cookbook collaboration called Made with Love, and there's 10 or 12 recipes from salads to cocktails in there, and a little bit of my story. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that. I was not prepared for how difficult it is to document your own recipes. It
Ah,
seems like, you just, when you
right.
love to cook, like anything else you're a subject matter expert at, right? Like, you
Yeah,
forget what you don't know, and you go to write it down and have somebody follow it, and you're like, "Oh, yeah. If I had to follow this, would it be as
that's
easy?"
no.
Yeah. It was a really fascinating experience.
Wow, that is true. Because you said there's some things you just take for granted and you just do it, and you
Yeah.
don't think, how would I explain this to somebody else? Um, Maybe that's
Yeah.
why and you know how I mentioned my husband doesn't like the structure
Mhm.
so much, but yet he's the one when I'd be like, "Well, yeah, I just sprinkled some salt. How much salt did you put?" I'm like, "I don't know. I did this and that." And
That's
he's
how
like,
I measure.
"We have quarter teaspoons, we have 1/3 teaspoons, we have half teaspoons, we have teaspoons, we have all the measures. How can you
Oh,
not
so
know?"
he follows the recipes to a T.
Or if he's doing his own stuff, he documents how much he's used so that he can repeat it the same way the next time. I
I love it.
it did, I mean,
Is
and
he
it's
a
one of those,
generator by any stretch?
I don't know. I should really
Yeah.
have him do his own. It is the funniest thing because, as I said, generally he doesn't even want to be told like what, like, you know, he was so reluctant to do the meal planning, but yet when it comes to his cooking, he's got to know,
Oh,
he's got to
that's
know exactly
funny.
what. So,
That's funny. Yeah, he's got something in his head that meal plans are like this
yeah,
big
yeah.
time-consuming, rigid structure thing. Yeah.
No. So I'm like, and what works for us in the kitchen, it's it's an understanding. Like, he will call me his sous chef, and I'm not going to begrudge that, because yes, if we go into the kitchen together, things will be run much more smoothly if I just say, all right, you tell me what you want me to do. That's just how it works. So, all right, Tricia. So, where can people find you?
Yes, so I hang out mostly on my YouTube channel and on Facebook, but you can always reach out to me at hello@triciasbitesoflife.com, and my website is triciasbitesoflife.com. That's TRICIA, triciasbitesoflife.com. And you can check out my offers there, or send me a DM, reach out via email. I'm
Mhm.
here for whatever you need. I do have a brand new free meal planning masterclass that's listed on my website that you can get to, and it just kind of covers the thought process that I walk you through to think about how to start creating your own. And when you get through that, if you feel like you need some more help, come check me out.
Ooh, sounds good. And yes, maybe I will have him check that out. And meal planning is not a bad thing there.
Yeah,
So,
if I can leave you with one thing, just start with, what do I
okay,
want mealtime to be? That's the question. What do I want it to be?
you got that? What do you want your mealtime to be? Think about it.
Yeah. Not what should it be, not what does anybody else say it could be, should be. What do you want it to be?
Exactly. Well, Thank you so much, Tricia,
Thanks
for
so much for
being
having
here
me.
and sharing all of these great tips with us for how to make our meal times less stressful, more enjoyable, and create those opportunities for connection. So we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yes, I'd love to.
All right. Okay, so this show can also be heard on Spanish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, live it.